Good evening. My name is Professor Sir Roger Graham, custodian of the repository at Ardchatton Priory. Tonight's volume concerns a subject that receives rather less attention than it deserves: immortals, secret societies, ancient conspiracies, hidden wars. People enjoy such things. The difficulty is that they are only part of the story. A very small part, in fact. The volume before me is entitled Friends Through the Ages. It records individuals who are not members of the Equis Bellici, yet without whom the organisation could never have endured. History has a curious habit. It remembers the people who issue orders. It often forgets the people who make those orders possible. The Duke of Wellington won Waterloo, yet somewhere a quartermaster ensured the ammunition arrived. A blacksmith shod the horses. A farmer pointed a courier towards a dry road. Remove enough apparently insignificant acts, and Waterloo never happens. The Duke remains important, but the others become indispensable. And the Equis Bellici learned this lesson very early. The Consistory builds hierarchies. Equis Bellici builds relationships. Over 3,000 years, the organisation has travelled beneath many names, sometimes openly, more often quietly. Throughout that time, a simple question has appeared again and again: who can help? Not who commands, not who governs, not who wears the finest uniform, just who can help. The answer to that question shaped more of history than most historians would care to admit. The Greeks had a word for it: proxenoi, hosts, guides, intermediaries, men and women who understood the local ground and could open doors that would otherwise remain closed. The Romans preferred another term: clientes, merchants, officials, military officers, people who possessed influence rather than authority. Later centuries spoke of companions, pilgrims, travellers, fellow wanderers on uncertain roads. Then, sometime around the 12th century, the organisation settled upon a simpler word: friends. A remarkably useful word. It requires no explanation, and it still doesn't. When William Cochrane asked, "How many friends do we have in Toulouse?" he was asking precisely the same question later posed in Paris, Vienna, London, Belfast, and New York. Who knows the ground? Who understands the people? Who can be trusted? Who will help? The answers changed, but the question never did. The repository contains many such names. Some are famous, most are not. A few examples: Professor Achim Luber of Humboldt University in Berlin, a historian trusted with unusually sensitive material and sensible enough not to ask every question that occurred to him. Godfrey Jones, known to most of us simply as Taff, engineer, inventor, communications expert, a man who spent much of his life constructing devices that either should not work or officially do not exist. And that distinction remains clear. Bill Heaton, former soldier, the King's Regiment, 22 SAS, possessor of a rare gift: the ability to identify floor plans approximately 5 minutes before they become really expensive. A talent which, I regret to report, remains in constant demand. Others appear only briefly: a harbour master, a teacher, a doctor, a railway clerk, a fisherman. People who never knew the wider story, yet whose actions altered its outcome. One opened a gate, another carried a message, a third simply chose not to ask questions, and that was enough. History often imagines itself to be driven by great decisions. More often it is preserved by small acts of decency. There is another category recorded in this volume: the houses. Families whose support persisted across generations. Uh, the Hamptons, the Joneses, the Pinkertons, the McDougalls. These are not organisations. They're not secret orders. They're not families. They're people whose descendants continued helping long after the original reasons had been forgotten. Such continuity is extraordinarily rare, and the repository values it highly. One passage in this volume remains my favourite. It appears near the end. No attempt has been made to catalogue every individual who knowingly assisted the Equis Bellici activities. Such a task would be impossible. It includes, as I said, harbour masters, innkeepers, priests, teachers, farmers, doctors, sailors, wives who asked no questions, husbands who knew better than to ask. There's a great deal of truth in that final observation. The concluding note is perhaps the most important. The Equis Bellici did not survive because they were immortal. The Consistory has immortals too. They survived because, generation after generation, ordinary people chose to help. Some offered their courage, some offered their expertise, a lot offered their loyalty, and some merely opened a gate at precisely the right moment. History rarely records such acts, but the repository should. Thank you for joining me this evening. The repository remains a work in progress. Indeed, I rather hope it always will. The finest friends are often the hardest to find. Join the reading rooms, Di-Fanteriabooks.com. Good night.